Creamer Media's Mining Weekly is speaking to Errol Smart, the CEO of Orion Minerals, a company which is involved in discovery and development, which is having a stunningly successful reception on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Errol, Orion is listed in South Africa and Australia. Where is it trading the most shares?
Surprisingly, the JSE is trading much higher volumes than the ASX. You know, year to date, and I only looked at the figures until the beginning of July, we traded over 600 million shares on the JSE. And in the same period, we'd only traded 450 million shares on the ASX. So it's amazing with the JSE, where we've only got about around 23% of our stock is actually in trading accounts on the JSE. We're trading much higher volumes on a pro rata stock listing basis. So it is good. It shows that there is appetite in the South African market. It is thousands and thousands of moms and pop shareholders. It's absolutely astounding. Over 14,000 South Africans that now own shares in Orion, from sizable chunks down to small little bits and pieces. But it shows you that there is retail appetite, and people cautiously are starting to step back into the exploration investment portfolios in South Africa.
How have you managed to attract such a large number of retail investors on the JSE?
Largely, it's because we fulfill a gap that we are a bit of a unicorn. There isn't anybody else that provides an exploration, development, investment opportunity for base metals in South Africa. And that's it. We simply got a first mover advantage. We came in first. We established ourselves. It is a dual listing, and our primary listing is the Australian Stock Exchange. So we're regulated by the ASX predominantly, although we have to keep to the JSE rules as well. But although most of our money since the 2017 listing, JSE listing, has actually come from Australia and Europe, a little bit of money has come from South Africa, and it's a growing amount. Every time that we do a placement, there's a growing volume that actually gets taken up by South Africans. But we're seeing more and more that South Africans are going to their wealth managers, they're going to their bank manager and saying, listen, I've heard about this company called Orion. Please buy me a couple of R1,000 worth of shares. And it is, you know, people criticize, they say it's expensive to trade the JSE. But it's a fraction of the price to trade a block of shares on the JSE than what it is on the ASX. So it is cost effective, and the average individual and, you know, middle income earners can actually go to their bank manager down the road in Priska town and say, listen, please buy me R2,000 worth of Orion shares. And it isn't cost prohibitive to do that. So the JSE does provide a very useful platform for that level of trading. I wish we could convince more fund managers and wealth managers to be advising their clients to invest in exploration. And unfortunately, it's a high-risk portfolio, and it isn't suitable for everyone. And I definitely wouldn't ask every granny and grandpa to put their money into the exploration game. But it is a very important small portion of a portfolio, because it has got that opportunity to give multiples of return, unlike many other investments that, you know, you're chasing 10 or 12% yield. An investment in an exploration stock is something that gives you multiples, hundreds of percent, if it works.
What more can be done to enable and to encourage junior mining in general?
It's a well-known and sad fact. It's our regulatory circumstances in South Africa are just not conducive to mining. It's not a attractive investment portfolio for junior mining in South Africa. It just takes too long to acquire a prospecting right, and then too long to trade it and deal with it, and to get a Section 11 approval when you need to change ownerships. So it's not an investor-friendly circumstance. The big question on the management of mineral rights and mineral rights portfolios in South Africa, and this debate that's been ongoing for more than a year very publicly now about a mining cadastre and the need for a mining cadastre. And last night, the DG again on television, on live television, on Business Day TV, gave the absolute assurance to me. And he said he knew I was going to corner him on this. And he said, I promise you, we've had some challenges, but it is in a matter of days it is going to be released. But by his own acknowledgement, that promise was made in the beginning of June to the public at the Junior Mining Indaba. That public was made to the Minerals Council before the end of last year. Mining cadastre is just part of a set of solutions. And they're all encompassed in a mining strategy document. We sat through weekends and actually worked on it and said exactly the question that you've asked. What would it take to make it work? And we came up with all sorts of solutions, including tax incentives that are actually non-erosive to SARS. We've made a presentation to National Treasury on that behalf. It hasn't gone any further. We need to reignite that. We need to get our mining cadastre, our mining title management in South Africa working properly. And then we can get tradable shares in companies, and then they can go to the JSE and other stock exchanges and list them. But you've got to get economies of scale to get trading on a stock exchange. You know, this whole concept that you can go raise R1 million on a stock exchange, investors aren't going to invest R1 million. You've got to give them a sizable chunk investment. You know, you're speaking hundreds of millions of rands to be able to make it worthwhile. And maybe that's also what we brought to the JSE that wasn't available, is a exploration company with some scale to it. You know, where we're trading at the moment is, you know, 1.5 billion rand. We could be trading at much a higher value. But when we first came to market, you know, it was small, but it was still sizable. I think at the time it was about 400 million rand market cap that we came to the JSE with. But I think if it was any less than that, we wouldn't have got any attention. And in fact, we didn't get much attention for the first year.
How much money needs to be raised when listing?
Well, you know, it costs you money to stay listed. And it's not the actual cost that you pay to the stock exchange. You know, that's a relatively small number. But to do all the compliance that's required, to be audited by a tier 1 or tier 2 auditor, you know, to keep all your king compliance, all of that compliance stuff, you almost need to employ an extra 1 or 2 executives on your payroll, and these are expensive executives, just to look after compliance. Now, that's right in a number of ways, because without compliance, how can you make it generally investable on the stock exchange? That's a protection mechanism that's put in place. But as a result, you get an economy of scale. And I don't think that anybody should be coming to the JSE and trying to be listed if they're going to have a market cap of certainly less than that 300-400 million rand. I don't think it's cost efficient to them. And I do think that they've got to have the expectation that they're going to need to raise capital of in the order of R1 billion within, you know, 2 to 5 year time frame. Otherwise, they're just never going to get traction. There's a lot of levels that we've got to deal with, and not all of them come from mining itself. A lot of them come from our financial services sector and our tax structures in South Africa, which are not as attractive as internationally. Very few foreigners come and invest on us on the JSE. It's South Africans that trade on the JSE. It's not foreigners that are trading the JSE.
Unless some new structure can come about, it's going to be difficult for exploration professionals to make it worthwhile for them to be listed. But should they be listed, do you think, exploration professionals?
A lot of them should. A lot of them, they've got really good projects. You know, I look at my peers and my colleagues that I see in the Minerals Council because of my role as the chairman of the Junior Leadership Forum. I see a lot of these people, and a lot of them have got fantastic assets. There's probably a little bit less experience than what you would have the equivalent company in Australia or in Canada. The executives of that company, the senior management of those companies, because there's so many of them, you know, 700 odd in Australia and thousands in Canada, the people have got more experience in dealing with the public markets. And that experience isn't a wash here in South Africa, but it will grow. And it's like anything else, you can learn it. And there are very good projects here, and they deserve to be listed, and they can attract capital. But people mustn't think it's a universal panacea. Believe me, it's extremely hard work dealing with the investment public on the day, because every step you take is in the glare of the public headlights. There's nothing that's not seen, but it does bring you access to capital, and every access to capital that comes at a cost.
What sorts of institutional investors should invest in exploration?
The PRC, for instance, wouldn't invest in exploration, but 1% or 0.5% of the PRC's money would probably double the investment in exploration in South Africa. Would it make a negative impact on the pension fund members' outcome? I doubt it, because if they get proper, technically competent people to advise them, they can make good investments. So, internationally, that's what happens. We've got one of the large Australian pension funds, and it's a construction pension fund invested in Orion. They've taken the decision that they can bring in their competent people to do an evaluation, and they invest on that basis. But it's a small chunk of their money. It's a minuscule fraction of 1% of the money that they invest every year. But for an Orion, it makes all the impact. And that's what happens in Australia is you've got these monster pension funds, and each one of them invests 0.5%. Now, the potential for a return, when they hit the jackpot, that jackpot gives them a yield of multiple percents. The reality is in exploration, very many failures occur. So they have to be more selective. It's harder work. And they've got to decide, is there a return on investment for the fund manager? And that's what we need to see here in South Africa. The fund managers must decide, is there a suitable return on investment? Should they invest the time and the energy and get the competent advice so that they know that they're making good investment decisions?
And will we really need to bring back the brokers? Brokers seem to have disappeared. We hear of wealth managers.
The brokers did play a very important role. And I think the industry is worse off for not having them, because they're market makers. The brokers start speaking about you as an investable project or investable company, and you start getting a following. It's the loss of the brokers hasn't been to the benefit of the industry.
Are you confident that if we take the right steps, the exploration market can be grown? Because if it doesn't, mining will end.
It can be grown. I think it's extremely frustrating at the moment. The Minerals Council has put in so much energy, and myself and my colleagues, in negotiating with the DMRE, approaching Treasury on all sorts of things. And, we get criticized all the time because we do try to do this in an orderly manner. And not do it in public forum all the time. Our regulators across the board, and I'm not just speaking about the DMRE, I'm speaking about everybody across the board, has to come to the table. If you're not stimulating the pipeline that feeds mining, unless you're discovering minerals that are going to be mined in the future, and unless you're getting the investment into the discovery of minerals, and that investment is immediately spent. That's the whole thing about exploration is, an investor puts his money into an exploration company, and if it's a proper exploration company and they are following the regulations, they spend all of that money on actually adding value. They spend money on drilling holes and assaying samples and doing engineering studies and doing environmental studies, and yes, doing social programs, because all the explorers that are successful and that are alive in South Africa are doing social investment, even though in terms of the mining charter, we're not obligated to do it. People do it. And it's a way of unlocking the value chain. And if it isn't unlocked, that whole machine is going to grind to a halt because we're not feeding the machine.
That was Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, speaking to Errol Smart, the CEO of Orion Minerals.